This critical, listen, I told you guys this was coming. I told you guys that this was going to happen. And it's already happening. This next generation, and I'm not even just talking about these college age kids, these high school age kids that went to Julliard. There's a massive scandal going on at Julliard right now. But this next generation, the kids that are small right now, 6, 7, 8, that are coming up, going to live their whole life in this. Because remember, we came up and the internet and all that stuff came about when we were already socialized into the world. We're different than the kids that were born and everyone had a cell phone in their pocket. We're different than those kids. They're different than us. They have lived in a different world. This group that comes up and their whole life is spent in this critical race theory world, that's going to be a dangerous group, because you'll see an erosion in the country, because what this stuff teaches them is laziness and excuses and everything somebody's fault and low expectations. Low expectations. But Julliard, great school in New York, a private 4-year school, the preeminent arts school in the country, the top one. There's nothing better when it comes to the arts, the fine arts. Look at some of the notable alumni who went to this school. Viola Davis, Robin Williams, the incomparable Robin Williams. I mean, there's no one like Robin Williams. There's nobody like, he reminds me of Robin Williams. He's incomparable. There's nobody like him. Kevin Spacey, even though he's a bad guy, he's a terrible person, his acting is insane. Andre Braugher, Ving Rhames. I mean, when you talk about brothers that act, I mean, my list is what? Morgan Freeman, Samuel L. Jackson, Denzel, Forrest Whitaker. And then it's like, Ving's in that next list to be in that next group. He's in that group right below those guys. I'd love to see Ving get his flowers, have a BT Honors Lifetime Achievement Award for Ving Rhames. Because he's been doing it hard for 30 years, starring, being a focal. I mean, he's great. This school has produced some of the most, I mean, look at the people this school. Miles Davis, a incredible history this school has. To now, Nina Simone. All these people went to this school, Julliard. Christopher Reeve, Val Kilmer. This school that's now being accused of racism. And wait till you see why they're being accused of racism. Keith David. Look at these people. Mandy Patinkin. Anybody who watches Homeland, Mandy Patinkin should have got an Emmy every season for Best Supporting Actor in Homeland. I mean, the role he played in that, Saul. I mean, this is just look at the people that went here. Michael Beach, he's a phenomenal actor. He was great in Lean on Me and Waiting to Exhale and a bunch of other movies. Look at this, and it's more and more. So many people came through this school. Great school. The top art school. They produce the top. It's like for basketball, if you put Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, UCLA, Louisville, just the ACC, the Big Ten, the SEC, Notre Dame, and just rolled it all into one for athletics. That's how this school is for fine arts. But now they're embroiled in a racism scandal. Artists form Julliard Black Alumni Association to stop racist practices at the conservatory. Last fall, the students at the Julliard School participated in a workshop where they were asked to imagine themselves as slaves while listening to an audio experience that included the sounds of chains, a slave auction, and an overseer singing a song that includes the N-word. Well, this is the acting school. They're trying to get you into character. All you guys talk about is racism and slavery. Okay. For the amount of time that you guys spend talking about that, we at this school felt like a way for you to authentically get into the role or challenge yourself is to see what a slave goes through. And to put yourself in the place of that slave. Because all you talk about is slavery and oppression. That's all you talk about. 24/7, 365. But of course they were offended by this. And the ensuing uproar and subsequent apology from Julliard's president, 25 alumni from the institution that formed the Julliard Black Alumni Association to help the school form a more equitable environment. Now, listen, this stuff is so crazy going on here at Julliard. Just listen to this. I'm going to let the great John McWhorter explain to you what's happening there.
And we have this new black person who feels that to watch Kunta Kinte, etc., is traumatizing at best. And I'm thinking of a story that Heather McDonald has in City Journal right now about Julliard, where half of the students...
I haven't had a chance to see it yet, but tell us about it, please.
Oh, it's a humdinger.
It's Heather McDonald. That's all she does is humdinger.
Right. But in this case, it's pretty black and white, so to speak. Half of the students there are BIPOC.
Half of the students at Julliard are BIPOC, black, indigenous, or people of color. So, non-white. Half of the students at this school are non-white in a country that's 60% white. Okay? That's an important piece of information as you listen to what this man is about to tell you about the story that he knows much better than I do. And I don't want to bore you by reading it. So I'm going to let him tell you.
In this case, it's pretty black and white, so to speak. Half of the students there are BIPOC. And yet, at this point, the black students at Julliard are roasting it as this nakedly racist place where we have to have a complete upending of procedure where they shouldn't have to play white roles, or if they're cast in white roles, the ones who are actors, that they should be able to play the white role as black. They should not have to learn how to play race-neutral people. They shouldn't have to learn how to speak race-neutrally because that's racist. And also in their manifesto is an idea that it's not fair to expect black students to be on time to classes, that black students should not be expected to have to front and to kind of walk a straight line because that's too much to ask of black students given all that being black every day entails.
You probably think he's joking. You probably think he's exaggerating. This is coming to first grade. This is coming to second grade. Why do you think people are fighting so hard against this stuff? For it and against it. Me, when I was in Scott, I loved that. You had to be on time. No grades. I mean, I was a bit of a class clown. I wasn't the class clown because where I grew up at, man, you had some funny dudes. You had some type A personalities. But I was a class clown. One of them. And I was disrespectful to teachers and the other students by inhibiting the teachers to be able to teach and inhibiting the students to be other students to be able to learn. Without distractions. However, I would have loved critical race theory as a kid. Looking back on it as an adult, I hate it. But I would have loved it as a kid. Being the kid I was. Didn't like doing homework, things like that. Now, as an adult, this is dangerous. Black kids don't have to be on time. Everything a black kid, a woke, any one of them that's woke, it's not just a black kid. Any one of the black kids that wants to be super woke and take whatever you said or did the wrong way, or see the worst intentions in whatever you did, just one of them could galvanize the whole group to see it as racial. Just tell them that it's racist. Because we're in a phase where I don't have to feel racism. All somebody has to do is tell me it was racist. Being on time is racist. Being at an acting school and playing in Hamlet, or playing some Shakespeare where we know those characters were white people. Asking me to do that is racist. Asking me to be on time for rehearsal is racist. That's dangerous, man. How do kids who grow up from pre-K, when that kid's in 12th grade and he's graduating from high school and then he's going to a college where they're going to be teaching, what is the world like once these kids grow up in this stuff? If this is what they're doing now, if being on time is racist for black students because it's so hard being black that you shouldn't have to be on time, because you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying if this is their demand now, what would the demand be in 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2040 as they escalate? Because we know they don't want equality. We know they don't just stop with one thing. They don't just stop with the Redskin helmet or the Cleveland Indians or Pepe Le Pew or Speedy Gonzalez. They just keep going and going. They want everything. They want your soul. So this gets dangerous.
Also in their manifesto is an idea that it's not fair to expect black students to be on time to classes, that black students should not be expected to have to front and to kind of walk a straight line, because that's too much to ask of black students given all that being black every day entails. And, needless to say,
this is hard to believe. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to
read it and weep. And yet the faculty are just rolling over backwards. And so you have one young woman who is deeply upset that a black DEI staffer actually showed her and white students a segment from Roots where slaves are being sold. I remember that scene. Her idea was that to be shown that scene, which the DEI person meant as educational about what black people have been through, to be shown that scene is to make her relive trauma. And this injured her, and the DEI coordinator, a black man, shouldn't have done this because it makes her relive, because we black people, we are our ancestors. We are 400 years old, and so we are reliving, what it was like to be sold. And this was it was Roots. And as Heather points out, everybody saw Roots back in the mid-'70s. I remember being 10 and watching it. I don't remember, and Heather doesn't remember, and she's right, because it didn't happen. Nobody was claiming that they were reliving the trauma by watching Roots. We all thought it was very educational, and we were glad it was on network TV. And now here we are, 50 almost years later, and we have this new black person who feels that to watch Kunta Kinte, etc., is traumatizing, and it was a racist act of abuse against her. And the main thing is, the white people running Julliard are just bending over backwards, pretending that all this makes sense.
Listen, Roots has been a big part of my life. As you know, I went to a school called Roots Activity Learning Center in Washington, D.C. Roots Activity Learning Center. Great school. It's what Dr. Umar's been saying he's going to build, but Roots was formed in the 70s and has been there ever since. It was named after the movie. Great, produced great students, got a great education there. Afrocentric curriculum. I also named my daughter after a Roots song. I had a queen named Amina. Height was 5'7", caramel complected, body like heaven. Met her through the cousin of my man Big Vince, and like some out the flicks, we've been in love ever since. My daughter's name is Amina from that song. Silent Treatment by Roots, because that's one of my wife's favorite songs. We enjoy listening to that song. While she was pregnant, the baby, every time we played that song, the baby calmed. The baby, she would, be grooving in there. Whatever was going on, when my wife played that song, it would be all good with the baby while my wife was pregnant. So we just named her after that song by the Roots. And I saw Roots later. It was the late 80s when I saw Roots. No, the early 90s when I saw Roots. While I was at the school called Roots. And yes, I get it. I could see it as being traumatizing, but you gotta, come on, man. That's history. That's what you talk about all the time. That's what explains your whole existence. That's what explains why you ain't got nothing. That's what explains why your teenage boys are shooting up crowds everywhere. Explains why the teenage boys are playing a knockout game and clunking elderly people upside the head for no reason. It explains why very few of us are reading at grade level. It explains everything. It's all you talk about. So now to see a movie about it at an acting school, where I'm sure there's a method to why they're showing this, because slavery is a part of history. Films and plays are many times about history. You may have to act in that role. You're an entitled, coddled, liberal snob who's been pampered all his life, or her life. There would be no reason for an acting coach or a theater teacher to think that you could get into the role of someone who was kidnapped from his home by a neighboring tribe, sold to slave catchers by an African chief, marched to the shore barefoot through the jungle at the end of a whip, presented to slave traders at the coast. If those white men who had those boats, if they rejected you for being too skinny, injured, lame, or whatever, you were killed on the spot. The slave trade, that was how it was operated. The slave traders, Africans, if the white men rejected you, because they would say, give me this one, give me that one, give me this one, give me that one, to go on the boat. If they rejected you, were killed beheaded on the spot. There was no okay, the next round. It's not like the NBA draft. You don't get drafted in the first round and you wait to the second round. No, you were killed on the spot. Very brutal thing. Then you were on a boat. teeming with rats. Teeming with rats. In the belly of a medieval ship that's constantly rocking. It never stops rocking. That's how it gets across the ocean. It's not like a cruise ship that's just gliding through the water. We're talking about a boat that's rocking back. Every rock is motion and forward motion. That's the only way it could get across the Atlantic. There's no bathrooms. Okay? I don't want to be graphic. There's no bathrooms. There's no ladies' room. No feminine hygiene products. You're chained to the floor and to the guy next to you or the female next to you. You eat there. It's hot. It's stuffy because you know the way boats work, that area has to be completely sealed off because of something called rain. Because if rain water gets down there, it'll bring the boat down. So water can't get down there. That area is completely sealed off. If someone gets sick, they're thrown overboard. You finally get to your destination 2 to 3 months later. A seasoning camp where they season the slaves. And seasoning is a one part that's always left out of the slave movies. The seasoning camps in the islands like Jamaica and St. Kitts and all these islands where they brought the slaves to season them before they were then taken to many times Brazil. Very few of the slaves were brought to America. Most of them were brought to Brazil. Even Mexico had more slaves. What is now known as Mexico had more slaves. So boom. Taken to different areas in the New World. Only about 1 out of every 10 slaves was actually brought to America. But anyway, they go to a seasoning camp where they beat the rebelliousness out of you. So you're beaten until you submit. And this is after you just got off that boat I described. Then you're put on another boat and shipped to wherever you're going to go. How could the acting teacher or the theater coach or whatever they call them presume that a African-American student raised today could get into that role without watching Roots or watching something like that or reading about something like that? Because we know they don't know anything about history. They don't know anything about what they talk about, this slavery and oppression they talk about. They don't study that. They don't read slave memoirs. They don't know who Odula Equiano is. They don't know who Phyllis Wheatley is. They don't know any of these people. They haven't read any of these memoirs from actual slaves. They haven't read Barracoon by Zora Neale Hurston, the memoirs of the last slave. They don't know any of this stuff. They're just talking about something they heard. Slavery is just a word, a buzzword for them. They don't know actually what it is. And the people at schools know this because they read these students' papers. They grade their papers. They see them in class discussions. They know the typical black kid coming out of high school knows diddly squat about slavery. So they say, okay, you're at acting school and you want to immerse yourself in the role. Here, watch this. That's considered racism.
And now here we are, 50 almost years later, and we have this new black person who feels that to watch Kunta Kinte, etc., is traumatizing, and it was a racist act of abuse against her. And the main thing is, the white people running Julliard are just bending over backwards, pretending that all this makes sense. And it's the sort of thing that makes you think, if Julliard is going, well, goodness, that's it. Especially given that, I also have in my inbox somebody who is in a theater program where black and white students have been assigned to put together a play about black pain in the past. And surreptitiously, the white people running all this have been paying the black students involved, the idea being that putting all of this together and acting in it is forcing them to relive trauma, once again, that they did not actually experience, but reliving the trauma because we're all 400 years old, not paying the white students. Then the white students found out that the black students were being paid, and the white students said, well, this is hard for us too. We want to get paid too. Then when it was decided that everybody gets paid, the black students were mad because they weren't being paid, only them, and the white students were getting paid too. What the fuck is all this?
So, New York City's prestigious Julliard School forced students to take part in Slavery Saturday workshop, where they pretended to be slaves while listening to the sounds of chains, whips, and the sale of black women for nearly 30 minutes. Marion Gray, a current student at the drama school who is black, described the traumatizing experience in an Instagram video late last month. She talks about how she was traumatized by having to watch this. There was a trigger warning and darkness with just audio to open the 27-minute and 53-second video. In the segment, Gray showed, which was less than 2 minutes, there was no visual, just sounds of whips and chains before a black woman was sold into slavery. A gavel bangs and bangs before voices say, "Gentlemen, gentlemen, calling your attention to the first item we have for sale. She's a fine pearl. She's a fine black pearl indeed. She's a fine black pearl indeed. She's in fine condition. She's young, she's supple, she's strong. She can wash, weave, plow, and sew. A good investment, gentlemen. She'll praise you a fine litter of pickaninnies." The sale was followed by a song where the N-word was used dozens of times before the clip cut off and Gray returned to her monologue. She says, "If this had been an auditory experience of some other simulated traumatic event, had it been a 30-minute auditory experience of the Holocaust, or a 30-minute auditory experience of rape, I do not believe it would have been followed. I do not believe it would have been allowed to continue for 27 minutes, Grace said, with tears streaking down her face. So how can you get into the role of a slave if you can't take this? If you can't take this, how are you going to play a slave in a movie? Not even a slave picking cotton, just a human slave. There's a story about a woman who just happened to be a slave. Like, it's not about slavery, it's about the woman. And in her life, she's a slave, just like if it's a story about me and I'm a YouTuber. I just happen to be a YouTuber, but the story's about me. How does she get into the role of that woman if she can't even take this without breaking down? How does she play that role without breaking down? Grace told American Theater that she and her black classmates had their cameras off, but were texting each other in distress. She told American Theater that one colleague FaceTimed her. And she said, and there was not a dry spot on her face. She was so utterly broken, I couldn't even look at her. I said, "I'll call you back." Meanwhile, the screen Zoom squares, because this was on Zoom. Meanwhile, the screen Zoom squares showed white students and faculty and some students of color going through the steps of the exercise earnestly without protest. When after it was over, the white participants said how moved they were by the experience, according to the American Theater. But Gray couldn't hold in her feelings. I was like, there were wounds here. And you don't get to just explore someone's history and culture with them. That is earned. You don't just get that. For 7 months, Gray didn't discuss the issue because she said it's terrifying because I don't know what they will try to do to me. This is the one thing that I hate. Every demand by these liberal blacks is kowtowed to. There's nothing they ask for that they don't get. Well, except for reparations. And you have a Democrat in office, so go figure. Everything else they get. No activist has been killed by a non-black person. All the activists that I've covered over the last few years that have been killed, they've all been killed by black people. Now, they weren't assassinated. It was random street crime, but still, they were all killed by black people. Being an activist is the safest occupation ever. Being a rapper is more dangerous than being an activist. Far more dangerous. Let that sizzle your spirit. But yet it's always there. I can't say nothing because they're going to come out and get me. No, you didn't say nothing for 7 months because it wasn't a big deal. And now you trying to get some reparations. You trying to get some sympathy, and now all of a sudden it wasn't a big deal. It was nothing. It was a nothing burger. And now the woke meter keeps, the woke throttle is just to the floor. Like they flooring it with the wokeness. So now everything, and more people going to bring up stuff from the past that happened, but it's not because she thought nobody was going to do something to her. Why she didn't say nothing. Give me a break. She goes on to say, I do not feel supported or respected or valued. I don't have any belief anymore in this school, in this institution, or in its administrators that Black Lives Matter enough. Black lives don't matter here. 2 days after Gray posted her video, Julliard President Damon Woetzel apologized and said the workshop was ill-conceived. He said it was intended to celebrate and learn about the origins of the African-American musical tradition, but said the section that Gray referenced was extremely distressing and problematic. Of course he said that. Because anytime somebody comes with this type of, if you don't kowtow or bend over backwards, you're racist. So this white guy, I mean, what is he supposed to do? The president's like, it's submit or you're racist. Those are the two options. And he's not racist because he's the president of Julliard. If he couldn't stand the sight of black people, didn't want to be around black people, the last place he would go, two things he would never do. He would never work at Julliard. He would never be a cop. If you can't stand the sight of black people and you hate dealing with black people, in less than 1% of all cops ever discharge their weapon throughout their whole careers, and only 18% of officer-involved shootings involve a white cop and a black suspect. The last thing you would ever do if you hated black people and hated the sight of them, hated being around them, hated interacting with them, and hated not being able to harm them, the last thing you would do is, one, be the president of Julliard, and two, be a cop. Okay? So this guy, safe to say, he's not really a racist, and he doesn't want to be known as one, so he just bent the knee. He said, "We deeply regret that the materials used in the audio exercise were not screened in advance, and that once the exercise was occurring, it was not stopped." And this is seven months later. The guest lecturer, Michael McElroy, a respected black performer and teacher, offered the program dubbed by the school Roots to Rep in other places with no apparent backlash. So this brother is the one who offered this was his idea. This program that this woman's all traumatized about was presented by this guy who's done it all over the country at all different schools, different acting schools, different theater schools. He's done this all over the place and never got any backlash. But because this one girl's upset, now it's a national crisis. And I don't think she's really upset. I just think she's just super woke. But this brother, this is the brother, the mastermind of that. Of all this. You can't make this stuff up. You can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. This is the guy. This is his program. His auditory sensory program for young black actors. Okay, you're oppressed 24/7, 365. It's everywhere. It's in all the systems and all the institutions. And you're an actor, and you're going to be playing roles of people who may be slaves. They're people, but they may be slaves in the movie or the character or the book or whatever the play, whatever you're doing. Here, can you listen to this? And they can't listen to that. She can't listen to this because nobody else had a problem with it. She can't listen to this. And she's going to one day play the role of Harriet Tubman in a play, or Sojourner Truth in a play, or some random slave woman in a play, or some escaped slave, or some freed slave in the post-slavery era. And she can't listen to this thing, this great thing this brother did, because he exposed them. I don't think he intentionally meant to expose them, but this brother exposed the BS. Michael McElroy, salute to you, brother, for exposing these woke people for their BS. Get in the comment section, hit the like button, subscribe. Peace. I'm out.